Hey guys, tonight we slip back in time, way back, to a world of misty rice paddies, woodblock prints, and the constant sound of someone coughing in the next hut. Welcome to feudal Japan. It's early morning, but instead of your alarm clock buzzing, you're jolted awake by a rooster that sounds like it's gargling gravel. The air is damp, your back hurts from sleeping on bundled straw, and your stomach is already growling. Spoiler, breakfast is not pancakes. You're about to step into a time that's as fascinating as it is uncomfortable. Between the rigid social rules, the questionable plumbing, and the fact that even your shoes can get you arrested, well, let's just say, you probably won't survive this. At least not without some splinters and humiliation. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always fun to see where everyone's tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink. The light feels wrong. Too golden, too hazy. And is that smoke? You're lying in the middle of a field, and not the scenic kind. It's a muddy patch of rice paddy, half flooded, filled with buzzing insects and the stink of something rotten nearby. You're barefoot. Your clothes are itchy. A nearby farmer with no front teeth grunts something in a language that sounds like Japanese, but it's not quite what anime taught you. Welcome to Japan, somewhere between the 12th and 16th century, depending on which war is currently ruining everyone's plans. Based on the sheer level of dirt in your fingernails, you're a peasant. Congrats. A woman with a woven straw hat throws you a basket. It's full of weeds. You assume she's giving you lunch. She's not. She wants you to keep weeding the field. You bend down, knees cracking like a bag of chips, and try to mimic the other laborers. The sun rises higher, and so do the mosquitoes. Your legs start to itch. You scratch. Mistake. You've just smeared a fat leech across your calf. The woman glares. You bow awkwardly. Everyone else seems used to this level of horror. You're not. By midday, your back is screaming. You try to straighten up, and a kid barely old enough to tie his sash gestures sharply. Keep going. You're learning your place fast, and it's about an inch above the mud. Here's your first mainstream historical fact. Nearly 90% of people in feudal Japan were peasants, known as hayakusho. That romantic image of samurai dueling under cherry blossoms? Yeah, most folks were too busy picking bugs out of their rice to notice. Your lunch break is underwhelming. Someone hands you a rice ball. No seasoning. No filling. It tastes like damp cardboard and the effort of 1,000 broken backs. There's a small pickle on the side. You savor it like it's a 5-star steak. Nearby, a man picks his teeth with a twig and asks if you've seen any spirits today. Not ghosts, he means kami, the natural forces that dwell in everything from rivers to rocks. You nod slowly, then sneeze. Bad move. The man backs away, murmuring a prayer. Sneezing in front of strangers was considered ominous. You might have just doomed the harvest. Oh, and by the way, you're not wearing underwear. Most peasants didn't. Just a loose robe, Hanton, tied with a cord, and if you were lucky, some straw sandals that disintegrated in rain. Your feet are already bleeding. You miss Crocs. Your toilet is a plank over a shallow trench. Yes, it smells. No, there's no paper. You use a stick. Welcome to medieval bidet technology. And now comes the quirky tidbit. Crocodile dung was used elsewhere in ancient times as contraceptive paste, but in feudal Japan, women sometimes wore amulets filled with powdered cat bones to protect fertility. Yeah, that's a detail you didn't need before bed, but here we are. As the sun sets, the air cools just enough to remind you you're still soaked from the waist down. You limp back toward what you hope is shelter, a lean-to shack made of warped timber and smoke-stained straw. There's a fire inside, or at least something burning. You duck in, and suddenly your eyes are watering. Turns out the smoke isn't for warmth. It's to drive out insects. Or possibly your will to live. The floor is dirt. Literally dirt. There's no furniture. People squat, sometimes on low stools if they're fancy. One old man offers you a corner near the fire. You sit and almost knock over a clay pot. It's full of fermented soybeans, and it smells like regret. Someone starts singing, a droning, nasal tune that sounds like a lullaby for ghosts. A child curls up next to you, drooling on your sleeve. You're too tired to complain. Outside, crickets chirp. Inside, someone coughs wetly. You're too afraid to ask what that sound is. Tuberculosis was common, and antibiotics? Not invented for centuries. Historians still argue whether feudal peasants were genuinely spiritual or just following the rules out of fear. You're leaning toward fear, especially after seeing that talisman nailed above the doorway. It's a monkey skull with bits of paper tied to its jaw. You try not to stare. You close your eyes, hoping sleep will come quickly. But the straw mat beneath you crunches. Fleas? Mice? Or just your imagination? Either way, you dream of your soft mattress at home, your phone, your deodorant, and plumbing. You wake again at midnight. Something just crawled across your face. You don't scream. You're too tired. You just sigh and let it happen. Welcome to feudal Japan. You've survived one day, barely. Your second day in feudal Japan begins with a shrill whistle. Not a happy tune, just a sharp, piercing note from a reed whistle blown by someone with too much authority and not enough sleep. You sit up groggily. The air is thick with smoke again, your throat dry like you've been chewing sand, and everyone else is already outside, bowing to someone. You rush out, still barefoot, your robe askew, only to find yourself face to face with a man dressed in crisp silk and deadly silence. His hand rests on a sword, and his face says, "Don't test me." You automatically glance up to make eye contact. Another mistake. He narrows his eyes. You quickly bow, low, deep, the kind of bow that makes your spine crack, and hope your blunder is small enough to be ignored. You just met a samurai, part of the ruling military class, and in this world, class isn't a suggestion, it's law. Feudal Japan's social hierarchy was stricter than a high school dress code. Samurai outranked peasants, peasants outranked merchants, weirdly, and everyone knew exactly where they stood or knelt. Mainstream historical fact time. The Shirokosho hierarchy, samurai, peasants, artisans, merchants, structured society like a human pyramid where everyone had to pretend they were happy being crushed. But it gets better. You, dear peasant, aren't just low-ranking. You're practically invisible. If a samurai feels insulted by you, say, by your posture, your tone, or your smell, he's legally allowed to unsheath his katana and end your historical vacation permanently. It's called Kirisa Gomen, and yes, that roughly translates to authorization to cut and leave. You stay bowed long enough to start feeling dizzy, but he walks past without drawing. Lucky. A kid whispers beside you. He's in a good mood. Someone gave him a new teapot. You decide to stay out of his sight forever. As the day unfolds, you're repeatedly reminded how society here is held together by an intricate web of respect, submission, and total lack of eye contact. Every person you meet, farmer, craftsman, old lady with no teeth, bows and waits just a beat longer than seems necessary. It's like a never-ending game of who can be more submissive? You try to keep up, bowing so often your thighs start to burn. You mentally rename this place Land of Leg Day. Later, you witness something oddly formal, a tax official collecting rice. Not money, not coins. Actual bags of rice, hauled out from people who already barely have enough to eat. The tax is heavy, but complaints are met with silence, or worse. People bow as their food is taken, smiling like it's an honor. You feel a little sick. The village headman, kind of like a dusty mayor, explains to you with a proud smile that this is how things stay orderly. Rice flows up. Protection flows down. You try not to ask, what protection? Because last night, something definitely chewed through your sleeping mat. Now for the quirky tidbit. Samurai were required to carry 2 swords, katana and wakizashi, but in some regions, they also carried a war fan, or tessen, made of iron. Yes, a weaponized fan. Imagine getting your skull cracked open by something that looks like it belongs at Coachella. As the sun climbs, you're pulled aside to help with a tea ceremony. Only, not the beautiful, Instagrammable kind. You're the human furniture. Your job is to kneel, still as stone, while someone else serves the tea. You lose feeling in your legs within minutes. The host drones on about the balance of bitter and sweet, the harmony of nature, the warmth of presence. You try not to pass out. Meanwhile, the samurai guest sits straight-backed, serene, and vaguely terrifying. You look at one for too long and catch a flash of steel under his sleeve. Probably a knife. Or maybe just a dramatic toothpick. You're not brave enough to find out. A soft argument starts over whether the tea bowl's imperfections add beauty or ruin the experience. Historians still argue whether wabi-sabi, a philosophy of embracing imperfection, was genuine belief or a fancy excuse for cracked pottery. Either way, everyone nods like it's profound. Eventually, you're dismissed. You try to stand, but your legs scream in betrayal. A servant helps you up, whispering, "Next time, shift your weight every hour." Every hour, you hobble back to your side of the social spectrum. On the way, you pass a group of ETA, outcasts tasked with dirty work like handling the dead or slaughtering animals. You realize, with a shudder, that even you're above them. Barely. They're not allowed to live in the main village, not allowed to drink from the same wells, not allowed to enter temples. But they smile anyway, offering you a roasted frog on a stick. You politely decline and gag slightly. That night, you try to sleep, but the social tension of the day keeps replaying in your mind. You flinch every time you think of how close you came to losing your head before breakfast. You curl into your straw mat, wrapping your thin robe around your shoulders and praying that tomorrow doesn't include a surprise sword duel or another lecture about how to bow with proper soul. One more day down. You're still alive, but you're starting to wonder for how long. Morning mist creeps over the rice fields as you shiver awake, dew soaking through your straw bedding. Your spine feels like it's been folded into origami overnight, and your stomach growls loud enough to scare off a nearby frog. There's no breakfast buffet, just a handful of cold millet, and if you're lucky, a radish that's seen better centuries. The day's already bustling, though bustling is a generous word for the quiet, synchronized shuffle of peasants heading to the fields. Someone tosses you a worn straw hat and a hoe, and just like that, you're a farmer now. Congratulations. You trudge toward the paddies, where you're expected to help transplant rice seedlings. It's not glamorous. It's not peaceful. It's standing knee-deep in water, bent double for hours, with mosquitoes treating your arms like an all-you-can-suck buffet. Mainstream fact incoming. Rice farming was the backbone of Japan's economy for centuries. It was more than food, it was currency, tax, and power. Daimyo lords measured their wealth in koku, which was basically 1 unit of rice, enough to feed a person for a year. So yeah, rice wasn't just dinner. It was destiny. The mud squelches between your toes, leeches latch onto your ankles, and the sun climbs higher, melting your will to live. You ask when lunch is. The man next to you doesn't even look up. When the sun is past the 5th tree, he says cryptically, gesturing vaguely toward the horizon like he's been living inside a Zen riddle his whole life. You sigh and keep planting. Now for something quirky. Scarecrows here don't just flap around uselessly. Some villages use kakashi, dressed-up figures wearing masks and even small weapons to trick crows into thinking they're guarded by samurai. One even has an old sake bottle in its hand. You find yourself wondering if that one's hiring. Hours pass. The rhythm of planting takes over, numbing your legs and brain. You start humming to yourself, something modern and wildly out of place. A nearby kid giggles, mimicking your tune on a reed pipe. You smile despite yourself. Then someone starts yelling. There's a commotion near the edge of the field. A tax officer has shown up early, and the village headman is scrambling to offer tea, rice, and the world's most nervous bow. You instinctively crouch down. Something about the way everyone freezes tells you this guy isn't here for polite conversation. Turns out the village is behind on its rice quota, and guess what? When taxes fall short, people pay with labor, or worse, their children. A sharp-eyed official points toward the farmer who made you laugh earlier. You don't understand all the words, but the meaning's clear. His family's in trouble. Historians still argue whether village heads genuinely protected their people or just played middlemen between the samurai and the starving. Today, it feels like a performance and everyone's trying not to blink at the wrong moment. You try to keep your eyes down, but your blood is boiling. You want to shout to step in, but this isn't your century, and justice here doesn't come with a jury. Just a sword and a shrug. Later, the tension eases. A bell rings softly from the village center, signaling the end of work. You wobble back to dry land, soaked, sunburnt, and sore in muscles you didn't know existed. Your hat is missing, your feet are prunes, and your dinner is the same cold millet again. But tonight, something different happens. An elder invites you to a quiet corner near the temple, where he lights a small fire and offers you roasted sweet potato. It's warm, smoky, and surprisingly sweet. You sigh in relief. As stars flicker into the sky, he starts telling stories of Oni, demons, kitsune, fox spirits, and heroes who traveled the mountains wielding enchanted blades. You nod along, the fire crackling between you. And then he leans closer and whispers, "There's a Ronin in the next village." Your eyebrows rise. You've heard the word before. Masterless samurai, disgraced, dangerous. His lord died. The elder continues, and now he roams, selling his sword for food. He chuckles softly. Sometimes honor's not enough, eh? You ask if Ronin are common. He shrugs. Depends on the times. Depends on the wars. Some become poets. Some become bandits. You sit in silence for a while, the wind brushing your face like a lullaby. The fire dies down, but the stories stay with you. Before sleep, you sneak one more glance at the stars. They're sharp and cold against the inky sky, like pinholes poked through history. Somewhere out there is your rail bed, your warm blanket, your phone charger. But here, tonight, you're just another name that never made the scrolls. And you're starting to understand why. The morning doesn't wake you so much as ambush you. A wooden gong clangs like it's angry at you personally, and you shoot upright, heart thudding. Your body protests every movement. You're sore in places you didn't know had muscle, and your knees creak like an old temple door. There's no time to complain. Everyone's already gathering for temple cleaning. Yes, cleaning. You assumed spiritual duties in feudal Japan were all incense and reflection? Guess again. You're handed a straw broom and told to sweep the steps before the monk rings the bell. No pressure. As you trudge toward the temple grounds, something catches your eye. A monk, barefoot and serene, glides past with a grace that suggests he's hovering. He doesn't glance at you, but you swear he knows you didn't brush your teeth. You start sweeping, trying not to kick up too much dust, when a young acolyte stops beside you. He grins. "Sweep with your soul," he says, and just walks off. Great. Still, there's something calming about it. You fall into a rhythm. Sweep, pause, bow, sweep again. Your mind starts to wander. You think about your soft bed back home. Streaming shows. Pizza. Then someone bangs a drum behind you, and you nearly scream. Turns out, today's a festival day. Not one of the rowdy ones, though. This one honors the kami, or nature spirits. People begin filing into the temple courtyard, dressed in their cleanest robes. Small offerings are placed on the altar, grains of rice, dried fish, the occasional coin. And suddenly, it's all so quiet you can hear the wind shift through the cedar trees. Mainstream fact: Shinto, Japan's indigenous religion, emphasizes the sacredness of nature and everyday rituals. Shrines were often community centers, not just religious spots. Everyone had a part to play. Even you, the confused, out-of-place peasant. A priest begins the ritual, waving a branch of sakaki leaves to purify the area. You watch in a daze, half mesmerized. The ceremony is simple, slow, and full of gestures that feel ancient and intentional. You don't understand all of it, but somehow it feels important. Then something weird happens. A villager drops a coin into the offering bowl and mutters a quick wish. Nothing strange there, but the coin wobbles oddly. The air seems to shift. A breeze comes from nowhere, and the candle beside the offering flickers toward the shrine. Not away. People murmur. Someone bows deeper. The acolyte from earlier leans in and whispers, "The kami liked that one." You don't know whether to be impressed or mildly creeped out. Here comes the quirky tidbit. In some regions, villagers believed specific kami resided in objects, rocks, trees, even tools. There's one shrine dedicated to a spirit that lives in an old cooking pot. They offer it rice and say thank you for hot meals. You eye the communal kettle in the corner a little differently now. After the ritual, there's food. Not much, but better than your usual sad radish. You get a taste of mochi, sticky rice cake, and your mouth glues shut like someone stapled your jaw. It's delicious.
It's deadly.
You chew with caution. Then comes the dance. Children with painted masks twirl on stage, performing kagura, a sacred dance meant to honor the spirits. The rhythm is hypnotic, the bells on their ankles jingling with every precise step. You sit cross-legged, trying not to fall asleep mid-reverence. A granny next to you snores softly. No one wakes her. Even the kami, apparently, understand exhaustion. You're starting to feel a sense of rhythm in this world, not just literal rhythm from drums and chants, but a daily pattern. Hard labor, strict rules, tiny, precious joys. Everything is connected to something older than memory. Later, you wander past a row of Emma, small wooden plaques where people write wishes and hang them at the shrine. You read a few. May the harvest be strong. Please protect my son in Kyoto. Let my cow stop wandering off. You're handed a blank one. You hesitate. What do you even wish for in a world like this? After a moment, you scribble, survive one more day. You hang it gently. Historians still argue whether these small rituals, wishes, offerings, dances, were rooted in deep belief or just community habit. But to you, they feel real. They feel like hope wrapped in tradition. As the sun dips low, painting the sky in soft oranges and peach tones, villagers start heading home. The air cools, and the smell of wood smoke carries the promise of evening fires. Children chase each other with paper fans, and you hear laughter, a sound that's been rare since you arrived. You sit near the edge of the village, your back against a stone lantern, and watch the sky change colors. For once, no one's shouting. No one's bleeding. No one's demanding that you bow deeper or ho straighter. You breathe in the silence. Maybe, just maybe, today wasn't about survival. Maybe it was about seeing. You wake up to the sound of drums, not festive, not gentle. Sharp, staccato beats, like someone's knocking on history's door with a sledgehammer. You sit up too fast, hitting your head on the low wooden beam of the house you've been crashing in.
Ouch.
Feudal architecture. 1 your skull. 0. Outside, the village is already in motion. Men with spears march down the path, led by a stern-looking samurai on horseback. His armor isn't the shining silver kind from movies. It's lacquered, layered, and terrifying in its simplicity. His helmet has horns. Real or fake? You're not about to check. Turns out today's lesson is feudal justice. Strap in. Mainstream fact. Feudal Japan had a strict, tiered legal system. Samurai, peasants, artisans, and merchants each had separate laws and punishments. Justice wasn't blind. It wore armor and carried a sword the length of your leg. The samurai dismounts, and the village elders gather in a semicircle like school kids caught passing notes. Everyone's whispering about a missing tax shipment. Someone apparently skimmed off the top. In this system, that's not oops, my bad. That's you may lose a hand, or a head, or both. You stand off to the side, trying not to look suspicious, which, of course, makes you look incredibly suspicious. The accused is brought forward. A middle-aged man with a kind of weathered face that says he spent his life arguing with the sun. He's trembling, holding a rice bag that's clearly lighter than it should be. The samurai questions him, calm, cold, precise. You can't understand every word, but the meaning is crystal clear. Admit it, or prove it wasn't you. Then comes the quirky twist. The man insists on undergoing a kugatachi, a trial by ordeal. Specifically, he'll hold a red-hot iron bar and walk 3 steps. If his burns don't blister within 3 days, the gods have declared him innocent. You want to scream. You want to leap in and shout. What are you doing? This is not how justice works. But no one asked the confused time traveler. You're not even wearing the right sandals. Historians still argue whether these trials were symbolic, rare, or just desperate measures used when evidence was lacking. What's clear is that fear was a frequent legal tool. The ritual begins. The iron is heated in a brazier. The man steadies himself, swears innocence, and, somehow, lifts the bar. You wince.
He takes a step.
Then another. The final one is more a stumble, but he finishes. He drops the bar. Smoke curls up from his palm. Everyone stares. The smell of burned flesh is unmistakable. A priest steps forward and carefully wraps his hand in cloth. 3 days, he murmurs. We wait. You don't know whether to admire the man's courage or cry from the sheer medieval madness of it all. The samurai departs, but not without a warning. Let no one else test the law, he says. The gods aren't always kind. After the drama, the village tries to settle into its routine. You're sent to help build a small bridge, more logs, more rope, more sore muscles. You wonder if Osho exists yet. Spoiler, it doesn't. As you tie reeds around a support beam, an older woman starts chatting with you. She asks where you're from. You just say, very far west, which earns you a knowing nod, like that explains everything. She tells you about a bandit problem in the hills, robbers who used to be farmers. Too much tax, not enough rain, she says. A man turns wolf when his children go hungry. You ask if the samurai ever protect them from the bandits. She chuckles bitterly. Samurai protect rice, not people.
Oof.
It's a reminder. Justice here doesn't come with clean hands or fair trials. It comes with hierarchy and hierarchy alone. You imagine explaining a modern courtroom to her. Lawyers, appeals, cross-examination. She'd probably think it was a play, or worse, sorcery. You spend the evening in the house of the accused, helping his wife prepare a healing poultice from mugwort and ash bark. She doesn't speak much, but her eyes are glassy. Not from tears, from waiting. By the next morning, he has a fever. You don't say anything. No one does. But the priest tightens the cloth bandage, and someone leaves a small offering outside their home. A rice ball. A plum. Not hope. Just habit. Later that night, you lie under the stars again, staring at the same sky that watched this system thrive for centuries. You think about all the hands that carried rice bags, all the feet that walked burning paths, all the mouths that stayed shut in the face of injustice because, well, what else could they do? Maybe justice isn't about fairness here. Maybe it's about order. And sometimes, those aren't the same thing. You're jolted awake by the sound of hooves on packed dirt and shouting in rapid-fire Japanese. A banner flaps in the wind outside your hut, deep indigo, marked with a family crest, 3 leaf-like shapes in a tight circle. This isn't your usual village commotion. Today, the daimyo, the local lord, is arriving. You shuffle outside, eyes squinting, breath puffing in the morning air. The whole village looks transformed overnight. Pathways swept, offerings stacked, children scrubbed so hard their cheeks glow. You try to pat your hair into something that doesn't look like survived a barn fire, but it's hopeless. You still look modern. Mainstream fact. Daimyo were powerful feudal lords who ruled over vast lands and armies, subordinate only to the shogun. They controlled taxes, justice, and warfare. Think of them as medieval CEOs, with swords. The daimyo's procession arrives in full display. Men in ornate armor lead the way. A palanquin follows, carried by 6 men with arms the size of tree trunks. Women in formal dress flank the sides, fanning themselves like it's a competition. Drummers beat a solemn rhythm. It's equal parts parade and threat. You stand respectfully off to the side, head down. Eye contact? Not advised. The palanquin doors slide open, revealing the lord himself. Not old, but older than you expected. His kimono is more embroidered than a Pinterest board. He steps out, surveys the crowd, and doesn't smile. That seems bad. He speaks, and a village elder translates softly for you. A land assessment is happening. Fields must be measured. Taxes recalculated. More rice is needed for military preparations. There's a murmur in the crowd. Then comes the quirky detail. The daimyo's personal servant carries a falcon. Not metaphorical, a real falcon, blindfolded and perched on a leather glove. Occasionally, the lord strokes it absent-mindedly while talking. What's it for? Hunting? Status? Emotional support bird? No one knows. The villagers pretend it isn't even there. You're assigned to help the land surveyors. Turns out it's less GPS and more walk in straight lines, dragging rope while sweating profusely. You try not to step on any frogs. The head surveyor carries a bamboo pole with rings on top and mutters to himself in numbers and curses. He yells at you once for stepping crooked. You don't know how to step straight, but you pretend to get it. During a rest break, one of the surveyors shows you a hand-drawn map. It's a work of art. Each field, hill, and even major tree marked with tiny symbols. You realize how much knowledge it takes to carve a world out of rice paddies in time. Then he chuckles and says something that the translator repeats. Of course, all this changes if the river floods again. So, land ownership is semi-fluid. Excellent. Historians still argue whether daimyo land policies helped unify Japan's agriculture or just made peasants' lives even more unbearable. Either way, the power was real and rarely questioned. Later that day, the daimyo holds a court session under a silk canopy. He listens to petitions. One man asks for help fixing a broken canal. A woman pleads for protection against roaming wolves. A young boy, no more than 10, kneels to offer a small gift, an origami crane made from washi paper. The Lord accepts it silently. No one breathes for 3 seconds. Then he says something short and sharp. The translator whispers. He says it's well folded. The boy bows so low his forehead hits the ground. You're reminded again, this world runs on gestures, on face, on status. Saying the right thing is never as important as saying it in the right way. Evening falls, and the daimyo's court retires to the temple grounds. Bonfires are lit. A small feast is prepared: boiled vegetables, grilled fish, sweetened rice. You don't get any of the good stuff, obviously, but you're allowed to observe from a respectful distance. You watch as the Lord eats, surrounded by attendants, sipping sake from a ceramic cup worth more than the village ox. He's quiet, calculating, and you can't help but wonder what he thinks of all this. Does he see these people as his responsibility or just parts of the machine? The falcon screeches once. A few kids duck behind a barrel. You try not to laugh. After the feast, the Lord stands. He addresses the village again. More rice, more order, more vigilance. Bandits have been seen on the edge of the province. His final words, translated, are, "The weak survive only by the grace of structure." You're not sure if that's a warning, a comfort, or both. As the procession prepares to leave the next morning, you're pulled aside by one of the daimyo's aides. He hands you a folded note and says nothing. It's blank on one side, but faint writing appears when held to the sun. Instructions? A code? An invitation? You stash it in your sleeve. Whatever it is, someone noticed you. And in a land where attention from the powerful is either a gift or a death sentence, you suddenly feel a lot colder. You reread the note under the moonlight, hoping the faint ink will suddenly make more sense if you squint hard enough. Spoiler, it doesn't. All it says, over and over again in tight calligraphy, is a single phrase: "The reed that bends survives the wind." Okay, Confucius. You tuck it away and return to the task at hand. Not standing out. But standing out might be inevitable now. People glance at you differently. Some more curious, some more cautious. And one, an old man with a toothless grin and eyebrows like wild grass, tells you, you've been marked. The wind's watching you now. You don't know what that means. You just nod because you've learned that in feudal Japan, nodding buys you a surprising amount of time. Today, though, we're leaving the village for something more expansive. You're being taken to the nearest castle town. Mainstream fact: feudal Japan's castle towns, or jokamichi, were strategic centers of political and military control. They weren't just fortresses. They were bustling hubs, laid out in patterns that protected the lord and kept the population, shall we say, well organized. The walk is long. Several dusty hours through hills and fields, escorted by a local merchant who's reluctantly agreed to deliver goods and you at the same time. He smells like dried fish and suspicion. Every few miles, he grunts something unintelligible and adjusts the sacks on his shoulders like he's hauling sacks of secrets. You arrive at the castle town by dusk, and the first thing you notice is the smell. Smoke, soy sauce, sweat, and something sweet. Your feet ache. Your stomach grumbles. But your eyes are overwhelmed. The castle rises in the distance, 5 tiers of curved eaves, whitewashed walls, and watchtowers like birds of prey. The moat is deep and murky, and the drawbridge creaks as carts roll across. Around it, organized chaos. Stalls selling lacquerware, silk, pickled plums, medicinal roots. Monks chant in the corner of a small shrine. Samurai on patrol nod to one another with the stiffness of men who haven't blinked in a week. And then there's the layout, streets that bend deliberately, like someone designed the whole thing as a maze. Which, fun fact, they did. In case of an invasion, attackers would get lost while defenders knew all the shortcuts. You pass a row of houses, each size determined by status. Big ones belong to samurai families, smaller ones for merchants. Tiny, neat cubicles for the laborers. Your guide drops you off at a tea house with a muttered, "Don't follow me." Noted. Inside, the air is warm with steam and jasmine. A young woman brings you rice porridge, bows, and disappears without a word. You eat slowly, letting the warmth untangle your brain. Then comes the quirky twist. A blind musician begins to play the shamisen in the corner, 3 strings, no frets, all feeling. His song is old. You can feel that even if you don't know the words. It's about a storm, a bird, and a lost sword. Or maybe heartbreak and boiled radish. Either way, it's haunting. A fellow guest, a scholar from Kyoto, judging by his lacquered writing case, leans toward you and whispers, he used to play for the emperor's cousin until he insulted a minister's poetry. Now he plays for food. You say nothing. The scholar sips his tea and adds, historians still argue whether he really insulted the poem or just played it better. Later, you walk through the back streets of the castle town. Curfews are strict, so you stick close to lit areas. In one alley, a man is selling paper charms. He tells you, without irony, that they ward off tax collectors. You buy one. Can't hurt. There's a training ground near the edge of town, where young boys in worn robes are being yelled at by a red-faced instructor wielding a wooden sword. You watch as they practice the same strike over and over, even in the drizzle. Repetition, the instructor barks, is the mother of survival. You consider that, and then remember you haven't repeated anything here except, "I don't understand." Back at the tea house, the innkeeper offers you a futon and asks if you're looking for employment. You mumble something vague, and she gives you a look that says, "Fine, be mysterious." Then she says, "Stay away from the western gate tomorrow. Something will happen." You don't sleep much. By morning, the castle town is buzzing. Whispers of movement near the walls. Officials doubling patrols. You stay away from the gate as instructed, watching from the roof of a storehouse like the worst kind of tourist ninja. What happens is quick. A few masked figures try to sneak through the outer street. One drops a scroll, another throws something sharp. A flash of steel. A scream. Guards respond instantly. Within minutes, it's over. 1 man is dead. 2 captured. 1 disappears into the sewers. And the message is clear. Even in peaceful times, rebellion simmers. Later that day, you're approached by a boy with a letter. No name, no seal. Inside, a single sentence. The wind bends for those who listen. This again. You fold it slowly. Around you, the castle town hums with normalcy, as if nothing happened. Merchants yell about dried squid. A noblewoman laughs behind a painted fan. A cat naps on a windowsill. The surface is calm, but you've learned by now, nothing here is simple. You wake to the low thunk of wooden sandals on stone, the shuffle of merchants setting up stalls, and the whisper of rain slipping off paper lanterns. In feudal Japan, mornings begin before you're ready. And today is no exception. You pull on your slightly damp clothes, because drying racks here are more about hope than heat, and step into the streets of the castle town. There's a new edge to the air. People speak in quieter tones. The guards don't smile. Even the cats seem twitchy. Your breakfast is grilled rice balls from a vendor with one eye and too many knives. He calls you foreigner, but not unkindly. Foreigner, he says, if you want to stay alive, today's not a good day to look curious. But curiosity is your only skill set right now. Today, you're about to meet the most feared, misunderstood, and mythologized figures of this entire era, the shinobi. Mainstream fact: while often romanticized as black-clad super assassins, real-life shinobi, also known as ninja, were primarily spies, saboteurs, and masters of asymmetrical warfare. They didn't vanish in smoke, they vanished in crowds. You're led to a bamboo grove on the outskirts of the town by a boy who says nothing but chews a twig like it's a nervous habit. He points to a small hut and vanishes.
Classic.
Inside, it smells of old leaves and ink. A man sits cross-legged, face half hidden behind a straw hat. His clothes are plain.
Too plain.
The kind of plain that screams, "I am not who I appear to be." He doesn't greet you, just says, "You can walk silently." That's step one. You hadn't realized you were being evaluated. You immediately step on a twig.
He sighs.
Over the next few hours, you're given a crash course in not being seen. Not invisibility, mind you, just extreme subtlety. How to avoid looking up when everyone else does. How to blend posture with crowds. How to move like you belong, even when you don't. He teaches you to breathe through your sleeves to avoid visible fog on cold mornings, to walk in the shadow of carts, to pretend to tie your sandal near conversations you shouldn't hear. And then there's the fringe fact. Real shinobi often disguise themselves as traveling priests, entertainers, or even beggars, roles that allowed movement between regions without suspicion. One famous female ninja, Mochizuki Chiyome, allegedly ran a school for kunoichi female shinobi under the cover of a shrine for orphaned girls. Historians still argue whether her story is mostly legend or based on a real covert network of female spies. But the idea is compelling, and your teacher doesn't deny it. At lunch, he offers you dried persimmons and asks, "Why are you really here?" You consider saying something profound. You end up saying, "I honestly have no idea." He nods, almost pleased. Then you'll do fine. The rest of the day is about tools. You expect throwing stars and blow darts. You get dust. Literally. He hands you a small pouch and says, "This is blinding powder. Don't sneeze into it." Another pouch contains dried fish skin soaked in oil, slippery when wet. And there's a hollow reed for underwater breathing, which seems great in theory until you realize rivers in Japan are rarely forgiving, and you don't swim well. And then messages. You learn how to fold a note into a twist that looks like a plum seed, how to hide ink under fingernails, how to encode phrases in poems. You also learn how painful it is to swallow a wax capsule full of information. You don't even ask how it's retrieved. He says, if someone's looking for a ninja, they've already failed. Later, he tests you, sends you back through the town with one mission: find out where the next tax caravan will pass without being noticed or asking directly. You spend hours listening to drunk gamblers, watching merchant routes, and accidentally spilling rice near a tax clerk. You catch a passing insult about bribes and a noble who always travels the same time each month. By nightfall, you return to the hut and tell him. He's not surprised. Everyone talks, he says, even when they're silent. You just have to hear better. Before you leave, he hands you a small paper charm with a black swirl drawn in the center. Protection, he says. You ask, from what? He replies, from knowing too much. That night, back at the tea house, the innkeeper raises an eyebrow at your dusty feet. Out late for monk, she says. You just shrug. As you lie down, you replay everything. The silent techniques, the hidden tools, the coded messages. You think about Mochizuki Chiyome and whether you passed by one of her pupils today. That quiet woman selling lotus roots? That toddler who watched everything? Then, just before sleep claims you, you remember something strange. Every time you thought you were alone today, you weren't. A shadow moved where it shouldn't. A reflection blinked before you did. Someone out there is watching you train. And maybe, just maybe, you're not a guest in the story anymore. You're woken before dawn by a gentle knock. 3 short raps. Too slow. That's the signal. You were told to listen for it. You almost hoped you'd imagine that part. Outside, the sky is a cold blue bruise. The mist clings to rooftops like the ghost of yesterday's thoughts. No one's around, except her. She stands beneath the paper lantern outside the tea house. Gray kimono, dark sash, face half-shadowed. She nods once and begins walking. You follow. You're not entirely sure why, except that you don't feel like you're allowed to say no. Today, you're heading beyond the edge of town, where the laws of samurai no longer reach. Your destination, the outlaw village. Mainstream historical fact: Japan's feudal society was strictly hierarchical. Samurai at the top, merchants below, peasants further down, but beneath even them were the outcast classes, like the Birakumen and ETA, and of course, bandits and ronin. Many villages were unofficially populated by such social exiles, outside the law, but inside necessity. Your guide doesn't talk much. Occasionally, she says things like, "Don't look directly at the dogs," or "Step wide here. The earth remembers blood."
She's not joking.
As the forest thins, the path becomes less a trail and more a suggestion. Thorny brush parts for her, but not for you. You quickly accumulate scratches, mosquito bites, and one mystery sting that you pretend didn't happen. You arrive at the outlaw village by midday. It's not what you expect. There are no skulls on spikes. No howling madmen.
Just people.
Tired-looking, sunburned, heavily armed, but people. A toothless man sells sweet potatoes near a forge. Children run barefoot through puddles. A group of older women weave straw into sandals while discussing the price of dried fish. You could be anywhere until you look closely. Everyone here is marked somehow. A broken blade tied to a belt. A missing finger. A tattoo that peeks from under a sleeve like a secret trying to escape. You're taken to the leader, a former samurai turned ronin. His name is Daigo. He wears no armor, just a faded haori and the weight of his past like a boulder on his shoulders. He studies you for a full minute before saying, "You smell like someone who hasn't bled enough." You try to explain that you're not really a warrior,
Or a spy.
or even very good at camping. He grins. Perfect. You'll learn fast. The next few hours are a blur of tasks you weren't prepared for. You chop wood with an axe that's missing a chunk of blade. You haul water from a creek that seems to actively resent your presence. You sweep dirt from a hut where the dirt is clearly winning.
It's exhausting.
Humbling. You make a joke about missing your Wi-Fi, but no one laughs, because they think that's the name of your dead brother. And then Daigo calls you over.
He wants to test something.
He sets up a series of jars filled with different materials: gravel, ash, rice, and feathers. He asks you to walk across each without making a sound. You fail. Spectacularly. The feathers are the loudest, somehow. He watches you flop like a wounded duck and sighs. You are as subtle as thunder in a cave, he says, but maybe that has its uses. You're about to argue when a whistle cuts through the air. Everyone stops. The village shifts instantly. Fires are doused. Children disappear. Even the chickens stop clucking. "Watch," Daigo says. A group of armed men on horseback ride into view. Officials, maybe, or bounty hunters. You can't tell. They don't enter the village. They just circle it, slow and deliberate. One of them has a list. He reads names aloud. None of them answer. No one breathes. After 10 minutes, they leave. The moment they're gone, life returns, as if a giant hand had pressed pause. Daigo looks at you. Now you understand. We exist in the spaces between rules. Fringe tidbit. Some outlaw villages operated for decades by paying silent tribute to corrupt officials or working off the books as unofficial guards for dangerous trade routes. These places weren't just dens of thieves. They were ecosystems built on necessity, survival, and the refusal to vanish. Later, around the fire, an old woman tells you that the village was founded by escaped prisoners and dishonored samurai. She claims her grandmother poisoned a warlord using mushroom ink and a scroll. Historians still argue, she chuckles, whether she was a witch or just brilliant. You notice the children here train with wooden sticks like swords. Not for ceremony, but survival. You ask Daigo if they'll ever leave. He stares into the fire. They'll try, he says. But the world is cruel to those without names. You sleep in a straw bed that night, surrounded by snoring you wish was just bears. The sounds of the outlaw village are comforting in a strange way, noisy but honest. And then to song. Somewhere in the distance, a woman is singing. It's soft, mournful. A lullaby, maybe. You can't understand the words, but they crawl into your bones like warm tea on a cold night. You drift off thinking of that song, of the child learning to fight, of the silent man with the list, of the space between rules and the people who live there because they must. It's in these cracks that the true story of feudal Japan breathes. Not in castles or scrolls, but in the quiet defiance of a village that shouldn't exist. And tomorrow, you'll find out what happens when the law tries to erase them. You leave the outlaw village before sunrise, your footsteps quieter now. Daigo made you practice walking with pebbles in your sandals to learn silence through discomfort. You're not good, but you're no longer the human thunderclap you were yesterday. Your guide doesn't say goodbye. She just disappears back into the mist like a well-mannered ghost. You descend into the lowlands, and soon, the mountains vanish behind you, swallowed by morning fog and the uneasy calm of returning to civilization. But the tension follows. You can feel it in the way every peasant lowers their gaze when a samurai passes. In the way no one speaks loudly. In the way silence is not peace, but fear. You've been assigned to help collect taxes. Yes, you. Turns out your name was borrowed by a low-ranking official who owed someone a favor. So here you are, walking into a village with 2 armored samurai and a wax-sealed scroll authorizing collection in the name of a lord you've never met. Mainstream historical fact: feudal Japan operated under a rice-based economy. Taxes were often paid not in coins, but in koku, units of rice. 1 koku was supposedly enough to feed a man for a year, though that man must have been on a strict rice-only diet with no room for snacks. You quickly discover this job is less about bookkeeping and more about maintaining fear. Villagers bow so deeply their foreheads press into the dirt. The elderly try to offer pickled radish and apology in the same breath. 1 child hides behind a goat, which seems like a terrible shield. You try to smile. Mistake. One of the samurai glares at you. Smiling encourages rebellion, he mutters. You make a note to save your cheerful demeanor for moments involving machi and absolutely no swords. The scroll demands more rice than this village can produce. The headman bows, shaking. The storm, he whispers. It ruined half her harvest. Please. Mercy. The samurai respond with silence. Then one of them flicks a pouch of ashes into the dirt. That's the warning. Next time, the ash won't be metaphorical. The villagers scramble to scrape together a compromise. Old woven mats, dried fish, a jade comb passed down through 3 generations. It's barely enough. You carry the offerings in silence, trying not to meet anyone's eyes. You tell yourself you're just observing, but you know that's a lie. You're part of this now. Fringe tidbit. Some tax collectors, called negatorai, would take personal bonuses in the form of tea sets, clothing, or even family recipes. One infamous collector once tried to demand a wife's laughter, recorded in a poem, as payment. He was later found tied to a tree, his ears filled with millet. It's unclear whether this was justice or extreme culinary feedback. Later, you ask the samurai if it bothers them. They shrug. A stable land is a loyal land. You ask what happens when the rice runs out. One of them chuckles. Then the people disappear. Quietly, if they're smart. That night, you camp beneath a sakura tree that's bloomed out of season. The petals fall around you like confetti at the world's saddest wedding. As you lie there, the words of the village headman echo. Mercy. Historians still argue whether feudal taxes were truly meant to maintain order, or whether they were just a tool to squeeze the lower classes into obedient submission.
Some call it ballots.
Others call it bleeding slowly. In your dreams, you see the jade comb again. It turns into a feather, then into rice, then into ash. When you wake, you're on a boat. No one told you this part involved water. You're sailing down the Kiso River toward a castle town for the next assignment. The water is calm, but the boatman's stories are not. He tells you of a town where taxes were protested by doing absolutely everything except farming. Villagers opened noodle stands, made bad theater, and threw elaborate festivals just to avoid producing taxable rice. They got away with it for 7 years, he says, laughing, until the Lord got bored of their kabuki and sent soldiers. Burn the whole place down. You gulp. He grins. The boat docks at dusk. You climb a hill lined with paper lanterns, and at the top sits the castle town. Grand gates, stone walls, clean streets, a world away from the peasant villages. You're escorted through the market. Everything smells of incense, pickled plum, and overpriced silk. This is where the elite live. You wonder how the system holds together, how people so afraid can keep bowing without breaking. And then you see it, a public punishment. A merchant is tied to a post. His crime? Short-waiting rice to save profit. His sentence? Exposure. He'll stay there overnight, shirtless, name written on a placard, head shaved in disgrace. The crowd watches silently. No one mocks. No one cheers. It's worse than yelling. It's acceptance. You want to look away, but you can't, because deep down you know this isn't just about law. It's about show. This is theater. A very real, very sharp lesson in obedience. Later, in the inn, you ask the innkeeper how he survives the system. He pours your tea with a shaking hand and says, "I obey, until I don't." The teacup rattles on its saucer. You don't ask what that means. Instead, you sit by the window and watch another patrol of armored men pass below, their movements stiff with pride and fear. You're starting to understand. Feudal Japan doesn't just punish disobedience. It rewards the illusion of peace. And in the silence, the system breathes. Even when it crushes.
You don't sleep well.
Maybe it's the echo of the public punishment. Maybe it's the tea that tasted slightly of regret. Or maybe it's the faint sound of flutes in the distance, soft, beautiful, and entirely unsettling. By morning, you're summoned to the castle itself. Apparently, your odd little journey has attracted attention. Or maybe they're just curious how you've survived this long. You pass through layers of gates, each one more ornate and better guarded than the last. The path curves on purpose, designed to confuse attackers. Or, in your case, nervous time travelers. The castle smells of lacquered wood and still air. You're made to kneel for longer than is comfortable, staring at the intricate tatami mats while someone important decides whether you're worth speaking to. Eventually, a retainer informs you that you've been assigned to observe Bugyo, administrators who act as judges, city governors, and moral supervisors all rolled into one very polished position. Mainstream historical fact. The Tokugawa shogunate system of law wasn't uniform. Justice could be swift, slow, or suspiciously interpretive, depending on where you lived and who you annoyed. Some Bugyo were fair. Others had fans made of human teeth. You'll meet both kinds. You're led to a small courtroom where today's cases will be heard. It's part performance, part ritual, and part, well, theater of control. Case 1. A farmer accused of stealing a chicken. He kneels, trembling, before the administrator. He insists it was his chicken. The feathered witness is not present. The village elder says otherwise. The administrator listens.
Calm. Polite.
And then he rolls a small inkstone between his fingers and says, "Truth has a smell. Let's see who stinks." The farmer is ordered to smell a bundle of herbs. Then the elder. The room is silent. Everyone pretends this is perfectly scientific. In the end, the farmer is fined 5 bundles of firewood. You're still unclear on whether he was guilty, or if the elder just smelled better. You're told this was a light day. Fringe tidbit. Some villages practiced smell trials for real. In one region, suspects were made to exhale into rice paper, which was then inspected for foul odor, supposedly linked to lying hearts. Another used the behavior of cats as judgment. If a cat sat near the accused, they were innocent. If it walked away, well, say goodbye to your rice. Case 2. A merchant woman accused of overcharging for thread. This time, the administrator doesn't even speak. He gestures, and 2 men begin unraveling her fabric spool, inch by inch. It takes an hour. Turns out she did overcharge by a single length of a finger. Her punishment? Public apology and a mandatory donation to the local shrine. You're impressed. Until you learn the shrine is run by the administrator's cousin. Historians still argue whether these administrators truly serve justice, or if they just enforce the illusion of stability, so long as the money flowed and the streets remained quiet. Later, you ask one of the scribes if this system really works. He shrugs. It's not about fairness. It's about harmony. Fairness is noisy. Harmony is silent. The phrase sits in your brain like a grain of sand in your shoe. You're granted permission to wander the castle's quieter wings, where lower-rank servants do the actual sweating. Here, the cooks prepare meals in total silence. A mistake in seasoning could cost you more than your job. You pause by a doorway and glimpse a training session for young boys destined for bureaucratic life. They're reciting poetry and copying characters with brushes too large for their hands. One boy makes a blot. He winces before anyone says a word. You move on. You find the punishment ledger. It's an unassuming book, bound in thin, worn leather, but its pages tell you everything. Executions for tax fraud. Forced marriages as fines. Branding for gossip. Branding.
4. Gossip.
One entry reads, 3 lashes and 2 nights in silence for mocking the governor's hat. You glance around, suddenly terrified of your inner monologue. You close the book very gently. Evening falls and the castle shifts tone. Lanterns flicker to life. The guards switch patrols. Somewhere, a court lady plays the shamisen softly, the notes rising like smoke from a too-warm bath. You're invited to a small dinner with the administrator, not out of kindness, but curiosity. You're the outsider who survived the roads, the samurai, the monks, and the tax run. That makes you unusual. The administrator speaks slowly, deliberately. Every sentence feels like a trap disguised as a compliment. You seem observant, he says. That can be dangerous. Or useful. You nod.
Carefully.
Your chopsticks tremble. The tofu trembles more. He asks what you've learned about Japan. You answer. That people carry fear like it's a family heirloom. He chuckles.
Ah.
Poetic. But fear is useful. It teaches the value of peace.
You don't argue.
Mostly because you're afraid. That night, in your guest chamber, you hear distant shouting. You open the paper screen just a crack. Outside, in the courtyard, someone is being questioned. Loudly. Painfully. You close the screen. You breathe. You wonder what peace means in a world where silence is purchased by screams behind closed doors. In your dreams, the administrator wears a mask made of inkstone. He asks you to judge a butterfly for flying too freely. You hesitate, and the butterfly turns into a chicken, then into a cat, then into a court lady whispering. Fairness is noisy. You wake to the sound of a bell. A servant tells you, "You're going to the monastery today."
Of course you are.
The path to the monastery winds like a ribbon dropped by a tired god. It curls through tall cedar groves, past crumbling shrines draped in moss, and over a bridge that creaks with the sound of stories too old to repeat. You travel on foot, as most do. Horses are for the elite or the dying being carted back from battle. You get sandals, woven, thin, and already unraveling. Your toes will hate you by sundown. The monastery isn't carved into a cliff or glowing on a mountaintop. It's simple, quiet, tucked into a hillside like it's hiding from the noise of the world. A bell chimes. Not a summons, but a sigh. A monk greets you. He doesn't ask your name. He just bows. You return the gesture, not quite sure if you're doing it right. He leads you into a courtyard where the air smells like pine needles and boiled cabbage. You're handed a robe. No explanation. Just a robe and a long pause. Your silence begins now, he says. So that's how it's going to be. Mainstream historical fact. Monasteries in feudal Japan were not just religious centers. They were political hubs, landowners, and sometimes military players. Some monks trained in martial arts. Others copied sutras by candlelight. A few did both. Imagine if your local librarian could also spin kick you into enlightenment. You're placed in a cell-like room with a straw mat, a wooden pillow, yes, really, and a scroll on the wall depicting a mountain that seems to change depending on the angle of the candlelight. You stare at it for hours. Mealtime arrives with a whisper. A bowl of rice, pickled radish, something that looks like miso but tastes like wet bark. You eat it all, slowly, in silence. That's when the rhythm of the place starts to seep into your bones. You wake before dawn. You kneel. You listen to the monk beside you breathe. You sweep the floor, even though it looks clean. You recite phrases you don't understand, but your body starts to remember them anyway. You're told to tend the garden, which sounds peaceful until you realize the entire garden is rocks. You rake them into patterns you will erase tomorrow. Each line is a meditation. Each curve, a lesson in impermanence. And back pain. Fringe tidbit. Some Zen monks developed elaborate death poems, written in the moments before they passed away. Short, elegant verses meant to capture the soul's last exhale. One monk wrote, "I cough and laugh, then fall silent." You imagine yours would be, "Too much radish. Never enough rice. Please send help." Midweek, a new arrival breaks the silence. A samurai in plain clothes. No armor. No weapons. Just eyes that look like they've seen too much, and a limp that never gets explained. He joins your chores. You rake rocks side by side. He nods once. It feels like friendship. At night, he lights a candle and tells you, quietly, because rules are bendable at the edge, that he's here for penance. For what? You whisper. He shrugs. Being good at war. Historians still argue whether monastic retreats were true sanctuaries or just political purgatory for tired soldiers and shamed nobles. Some say monks welcomed warriors. Others say they feared their presence would taint the spirit of the space. You're not sure what this place is. A refuge? A prison with incense? During meditation, your knees throb. Your back screams. Your thoughts rebel. You try to focus on your breath, but your brain prefers grocery lists and regrets. A monk taps your shoulder with a flat stick. Not hard, just enough. You bow in thanks. It's a reminder, not a punishment. You're learning. Slowly. One morning, you're assigned to water the prayer trees. Each one holds a scroll tied with string. Wishes. Hopes. Sometimes complaints disguised as prayers. You read one. Please let the rice not rot this year. Another. Forgive me. I did not know she was married. Another. I miss the sound of my child's laugh. You water them gently, like the roots carry secrets. Then, unexpectedly, you're invited to the fire ceremony. It happens once a month. A kind of spiritual clearing. Monks chant. Bells ring. Papers are burned. Old grudges, fears, and offerings. You're told to write one thing you want to let go of. You write, surviving without belonging. You toss it into the fire, and for a brief moment, the flame dances like it's listening. That night, the samurai friend finds you again. He brings 2 cups of tea that probably aren't allowed. You sip in silence for a while. Then he says, I once took a temple like this. Different province. The abbot stood in my way. He didn't beg, just bowed. I couldn't strike. You ask what happened. I burned it anyway, but it still haunts me. You both sip again. He says, some ghosts are patient. They wait until you're quiet enough to hear them. You don't sleep that night, but you do stare at the scroll on your wall until the mountain becomes a mirror. Eventually, it's time to leave. You're handed your original clothes, now rougher, oddly tighter. Maybe your body has changed, or maybe your soul grew a size. You bow to the monks. They bow in return. The head monk says, "Remember, chop wood, carry water." Before enlightenment, after enlightenment. You think that means life keeps going, whether you're at peace or just pretending. On your way down the hill, you pause at the bridge. You whisper a silent thank you, and you keep walking. You descend into the lowlands with new muscles in your legs and something quieter in your chest. The world feels louder now. Crickets, wind, gossip in village corners. Everything is a little too sharp after so many silent days at the monastery. But you push forward. You're heading somewhere more bustling. The market town greets you with smells first. Soy sauce and grilled eel, raw fish packed in salt, drying persimmons swinging on threads. You haven't seen this many people in one place since you were sent to count tax rice with the village elders. And that was mostly just old men arguing about whose sack had more mice in it. This place, though, it's alive. You squeeze past merchants shouting about their wares like they're selling gold. Pickled plums. Keep your husband faithful. Lanterns carved by the blind monk of Kiso. Silk from a worm that only eats moonlight leaves. That last one is almost definitely a scam. Mainstream historical fact. Market towns in feudal Japan were tightly connected to castle towns and highways like the Takedo. Many sprung up around post stations, feeding off samurai, travelers, and daimyo processions. Some even became proto-cities, buzzing with early capitalism before anyone knew what that word meant. You find an alley with shade and less shouting and lean against a wall that's probably held up drunk poets, runaway apprentices, and at least one lost cat. Then you hear it, a chime, then a rhythm, a drum. You follow it. At the end of the alley, a crowd has gathered in a loose circle. At the center is a performer. He balances a fan on his nose while hopping on one foot and reciting a love poem backward. It shouldn't work, but it does. A boy beside you mutters, "Daikagura." You nod like you know what that is. Fringe tidbit. Daikagura was originally a sacred ritual to drive away evil spirits, but over time it morphed into street performance, a mix of juggling, magic, and religious blessing. Some performers were semi-nomadic, carrying their licenses like priests with props. The crowd laughs. The man bows. Coins clink into his bowl. And then it's over, just like that.
He moves on. So do you.
But the town isn't done with you yet. A group of children dash past, chasing a paper kite shaped like a fox. One bumps into you, then bows an apology, so fast you barely see it. You bow back. Reflex now. You step into a tea house. Low tables. Cushions faded from hundreds of polite arguments and spilled tea. You sit and order what sounds least threatening, green tea and a sweet rice ball. The server sets them down with a smile, too practiced to be real. Her eyes flick to your sandals. "Traveler?" she asks. "Just passing through," you answer. She nods. She's heard that before. Behind you, a samurai in lacquered armor is debating loudly with a merchant in rich brocade. Something about salt taxes and my cousin was cheated. You tune them out, watching a sparrow hop along the rafters. Even the birds are busier here. Historians still argue whether these market towns truly allowed for class fluidity or whether the appearance of mingling was just illusion. Could a peasant really climb through clever trade? Or was it just a softer cage with better snacks? You finish your tea and step back into the street. It's getting dark and the lanterns are being lit. Soft orange glows swaying like quiet thoughts. A traveling theater troupe is setting up. Painted masks.
Drums.
One actor rehearses a dramatic ball, and you swear he's already performed it 1,000 times. He lands in the dust, looks up at the sky, and whispers, "Why does she not wait for me?" You nearly clap, but no one else does. It's rehearsal, after all. You find a quiet corner behind a sake stall and strike up a conversation with the owner, an older woman with sharp eyes and a bamboo fan. "People here," she says between pores, "come for dreams. But they leave with debts." You ask why she stays. She shrugs. Every night ends. But there's always tomorrow's song. You buy a small bottle. Just one. It's strong and sweet and makes your ears warm. The noise of the town turns into music. That's when you notice him again. The samurai from the monastery. He's leaning against a post, watching a puppet show with a child on his knee. She's not his. Maybe a niece? Maybe just a borrowed moment of softness. He sees you, nods once, then turns back to the stage. You smile. You keep walking, deeper into the maze of the market, past stalls selling combs, dried squid, stolen glances, and promises no one intends to keep. You realize something as the night unfolds. Survival isn't just about food and shelter. It's about knowing when to laugh, who to trust, and how to carry 1,000 unspoken rules without letting them crush you. And in this town, the rules are many. No sword drawn past dusk. No trading without stamp. No shouting during poetry. You break the last one. Quietly. A haiku slips from your lips as you pass the sake stall again. Night's lanterns flicker, like secrets held in silence. A sparrow watches. No one hears it, but you feel lighter. Tomorrow you'll leave. Try the road south. Maybe find work guarding a rice storehouse or delivering scrolls for some minor lord. But tonight you belong here. In a market where voices tangle like string. Where the air smells like burnt sugar and lies. Where even a monk could vanish into laughter if he wanted to. And maybe you do. You wake to the sound of a rooster that apparently skipped every etiquette lesson ever taught. It crows like it's being paid per scream. The market town is quieter now, just morning whispers and the soft creak of stalls opening. You stretch your legs under the thin blanket you managed to borrow at the tea house and step outside. The stone street still holds the chill from last night. A noodle cellar is already boiling water, and the scent of soy and scallion hits you like a gentle slap. You're not staying. You've decided that much. The town was a burst of life, but your feet itch again, and you're ready to follow them.
South.
Toward the coast. Towards samurai ports and maybe a job you can survive longer than 3 days in. You join a group of travelers along the Takedo, the great road that links Kyoto and Edo. It's less glamorous than it sounds. Dust, sore feet, and more than one man with opinions about horse dung as fertilizer. Still, the road is wide, and the company is oddly comforting. Mainstream historical fact. The Takedo was the most important of the 5 routes of the Edo period. With 53 official stations, it became the lifeline of travel, commerce, and communication between Japan's major centers. Daimyo processions, merchants, pilgrims, and wandering monks all shared this path. You walk past rice paddies shimmering in the morning sun. A child rides on a wooden sled pulled by her brother, shrieking in joy. The man next to you points out a bird and tells you it's lucky if it poops on your sleeve. You're not entirely convinced. A few miles in, you reach a checkpoint. Officials in stiff robes inspect papers, check baggage, and ask pointed questions. You have no travel permit, no merchant license, and technically no reason to be here.
But you bow just right.
Speak just carefully. Let your calloused hands and half-prayerful posture suggest pilgrim more than problem. And they let you through.
Barely.
Fringe tidbit. Some people, especially women, disguise themselves as men to travel the Takedo, avoiding the strict travel restrictions imposed by the Tokugawa shogunate. It was common enough that guards began checking voices and necklines with unnerving enthusiasm. You don't get searched, but your neighbor does. They find nothing, unless you count a lucky pebble wrapped in silk. He insists it's a family charm. The guard lets him keep it, but rolls his eyes hard enough to sprain something. Past the checkpoint, the road dips and rises through gentle hills. The sun is high now, and a breeze finally stirs. You take shelter at a tea stand run by a woman whose face is round as a mooncake and whose tea tastes like forgiveness. You sit with other travelers, each with a reason to walk, none sharing it. A merchant with blisters. A ronin with silence. A scholar who talks to himself, not unkindly. You learn not to ask names. Names tie you down. You learn to watch feet. Limping? Blisters. Bare?
Poor.
Sandals too clean? Probably lying about something. As the afternoon stretches on, you pass through a post town, a blur of inns, stables, and roadside temptations. You almost stay, but something tugs you forward. Maybe it's the story you haven't lived yet. Maybe it's just the promise of the sea. Historians still argue whether travel in feudal Japan was truly open to the lower classes or merely a tightly regulated illusion. On one hand, wanderers did exist, pilgrims, performers, even criminals in disguise. On the other, most peasants spent entire lives without seeing more than a handful of villages. You walk until your knees groan and your thoughts scatter. Night settles like dust on your shoulders. You find a roadside shrine and decide to sleep under its roof. There's straw on the floor and incense lingering in the air. You light a tiny lamp. You whisper thanks to whichever spirit watches this bend of the road. And then footsteps. Slow. Measured. Barefoot. You sit up. A woman in white steps into view. Face hidden behind a veil. She carries no pack, no shoes, and walks like the ground has promised not to hurt her. She sits a few feet away.
Silent. You don't speak. Neither does she.
Just two people. Just the night. You fall asleep first. In the morning, she's gone. There are no footprints. You wonder if she was ever there. You check your pack just in case. Nothing missing. A leaf you don't recognize tucked into the strings. You keep walking. By midday, you reach a coastal town. Boats bobbing in the harbor. Gulls screaming like they lost a bet. You trade a few copper coins for dried squid and watch fishermen untangle nets like old men unbraiding stories. A dockworker tells you there's a job opening on a rice barge heading up the river. You'll smell like mold and fish guts, he warns. But it pays. Kind of. You consider it. Then you see a puppet theater unpacking on the dock. Same troupe as before. They recognize you. Want a job holding the moon prop? The director asks. We lost a boy to dysentery and bad decisions.
You say yes.
It's not what you expected, but it fits. That night, under stars and the creak of salt wet wood, you stand behind a curtain with a bamboo pole and a paper moon, lifting it high while a man sings about lost love and sea ghosts. The audience claps. Your arms ache, and you smile. The road, it seems, has more rolls than rules. The paper moon trembles in your hands as the boat rocks gently beneath you. The performance is over, but the sea never stops moving. You lower the prop carefully, tuck it behind the set piece shaped like a pine tree, and step out onto the deck. Salt wind brushes against your face, cool and constant. Your fellow performers chatter and laugh softly as they clean up, folding silk backdrops, packing lacquered masks, and arguing over who forgot to tie down the water barrel. You sit on a wooden crate, rubbing your shoulders, and for a fleeting moment, you feel it. Peace. A stillness inside you that's rare in a world that demands you survive every second. The boat glides up a slow river, bound for another town. Another show. Another borrowed night of applause. Mainstream historical fact. Kabuki and bunraku puppet theaters were major parts of popular entertainment during the Edo period, especially in urban centers like Osaka and Edo. These performances were elaborate, colorful, and often banned, then unbanned, then banned again, usually depending on how moral the shogunate felt that week. You're not a star, not even close. But your job, lifting the moon, setting out paper waves, fanning incense, means something. It earns you rice. It earns you sleep under a tarp when it rains. It earns you laughter shared with a one-eyed drummer who swears he once dated a princess. You suspect he also once dated a turnip. During downtime, you wander the river towns. Places blur together, each with its own version of the same wooden bridge, the same fish drying on racks, the same old man shouting about stolen sandals. You grow familiar with the rhythm of this floating life. Unloading, performing, loading, drifting. In one village, you buy a rice ball from a boy with no front teeth. He tells you it's extra lucky because he dropped it once, and the gods spared it. You eat it anyway. In another, you're invited to a private viewing for the local magistrate, who watches the entire show with the expression of someone trying to remember if he left the bath running. Afterward, he gifts the troupe 2 melons and a goat. The goat escapes. Fringe tidbit. In some river regions, people believed that puppets had souls. Performers held funerals for broken ones, floating them down rivers in solemn ceremonies. Sometimes people would whisper secrets to the dolls before the final goodbye, confessions, regrets, prayers. One night, an old puppeteer, Okabe-san, tells you this while mending a cracked puppet hand. You ask him if it's true. He says, only if the puppet listens. Later that week, a storm rolls in. Black sky, angry wind. You tie down the prop chest, your hands raw from the rope. Lightning flashes across the river like a shattered fan. The boat creaks, complains, but doesn't give. You and the others huddle under canvas, soaked, miserable, and strangely calm. Nobody says much. There's comfort in shared helplessness. Historians still argue whether traveling performers were viewed as vital cultural treasures or suspicious nomads undermining the strict class system. Records show both admiration and disdain, sometimes in the same paragraph. The storm passes by dawn. The river is calmer, but swollen. A tree floats past, upside down. That day, you find a kitten under a bench at the dock, covered in soot, eyes too big for its face. You feed it a scrap of dried fish. It decides you belong to it now. You name it Turnip. As the weeks slip by, the towns blend further. You stop remembering their names. You start remembering smells instead. A plum orchard in full bloom. A sake house fermenting just right. A boat builder's shop rich, with a scent of cedar and sweat. You make friends with a girl who repairs sandals. She teaches you to mend your own. Her hands are scarred. Her laugh is loud. One night, she braids a string into your sleeve and says, for safety. She doesn't say goodbye when you leave, just tosses a rice cracker at your head and walks away. You keep the string. The cat rides in your pack now, likes fish, hates drums. One evening, as you drift under a low bridge covered in lanterns, the drummer points at you and says, you look less like someone pretending to belong. You smile. Maybe it's true. You've learned to survive in a world not built for you. You've learned to laugh when there's nothing else to do. And you've learned that in feudal Japan, sometimes the quiet roles, the ones behind the curtain, were the ones that lasted longest. You keep your head low, your hands busy, your heart curious. The show goes on, always. And now, my friend, we ease into quiet. Let your breath settle. Let your eyes grow heavier with every gentle word that follows. Wind down 300 words. The moon has risen, full and watchful, casting its soft silver over a world that no longer asks anything of you tonight. The river slows. The boat barely moves. Somewhere in the distance, a flute plays a wandering tune, curling through the still air like smoke from a quiet hearth. Turnip purrs softly against your chest. The warmth of your breath blends with the hush of the night. Around you, the shadows have softened, the sharp edges of the day smoothed into lullabies. Your muscles relax into the rhythm of sleep. Your heartbeat steady. Your thoughts quiet. You feel the wood beneath you, sturdy and worn, like stories whispered across lifetimes. You imagine the paper moon above you, no longer held in your hands, but resting gently in the sky, its glow asking nothing, promising rest. The past has faded. The future waits patiently. And here you are, exactly where you need to be. Tonight, there are no battles, no taxes, no rice quotas, no rules, only breath, only warmth, only the soft drift of a mind ready to dream. So close your eyes. Let go of the dust and the footsteps. Let go of the sharp rooster cries and awkward tea rituals. Let go of the sandals that never fit and the names you never asked.
There is only stillness now, and sleep.
Let it find you, like a shrine at the bend of the road, like a lantern left just for you, like a quiet hand lifting the moon.